In today's video, I'm going to break down the Toronto rental market, go through prices based on areas in terms of condos and freehold rental properties, and give you some analysis throughout the video. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax, Realtron, Realty Inc. As always, you can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my office, and my Instagram. Feel free to get in touch with me with any further questions you may have regarding the Toronto real estate market, GTA real estate market, or if you want help with any matters in real estate. Furthermore, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support in that regard is much appreciated. If you wish to do so, happily I would accept your subscription and your like. But anyways, let's get into the point of today's video, which is a basic rundown of the Toronto rental market at the end of the month. Just looking at this month at large. We're not looking at quarters, although in the future I'm going to do quarter rental market and quarter real estate market breakdowns as well. This is based on my own research. I went through the data myself. And basically, I'm going to break down in this video the average cost of rent for property type, so separating them into condominiums and freehold detached, semi-detached townhome properties. And I'm also going to break them down by area. So we're looking at downtown, we're looking at central Toronto, so central Toronto excluding downtown obviously. We're looking at eastern Toronto, Toronto West, and we're looking at York region, which is a very vast and gigantic piece of land. You know, York region, you have anything from Markham to King to Richmond Hill. But, you know, we're just looking at York region at large. And maybe in future videos, I'll break down York region in more specific areas as well. So once again, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review before we get into the topic. And yes, you can find my contact info in the description box. At a more qualitative glance, because we're going to go through the quantitative aspect of this video later through the numbers, I've noticed that the Toronto real estate market / GTA real estate market for rentals, so the rental market at large, is getting hotter, specifically for freehold detached in York region. For instance, right now I have a property for rent in Richmond Hill, and we got 52 showings in a matter of 3 to 4 days. So that's 52 separate people coming in to see it with their agents, and sometimes just them by themselves. And furthermore, we have gotten 5 offers now. We have, successfully been able to rent it out on paper. The occupancy has yet to come. But 4 to 5 offers, and 2 of the offers actually offered the entire year up front. Safe to say we rented it with a person offering the entire year up front, and there was a lot of attraction to this property. And this is where I'd start to notice, okay, there is a shift occurring of a lot of people who first were priced out of the purchase and sale market for detached, semi-detached freehold properties. Then they shifted to condominiums, maybe townhomes at first, and then condominiums. And now the market for that is getting quite hot. So naturally, the next step in the order of operations, shifting down towards the next option for people who are telling themselves, okay, we're no longer going to buy right now, is freehold detached properties. So that was just a personal anecdote to say, yes, even in my daily experience working with landlords and tenants, I see that the prices are increasing and so is demand. But now let's move on to the numbers, where I'll break down, as I said, based on area and property type. So just breaking it down purely based on 2 categories: condos and detached, semi-detached townhomes and freehold rentals. We'll start with downtown Toronto and we'll look at condos first. From March 1st to March 29th, which is the date of recording of this video, you might be watching it on March 30th or March 31st. The average cost of a condo in downtown to rent, so across all bedroom numbers, obviously this is a vast category, there's a lot of variations, was $21.97, so $2,197,000. This was based on 1,156 transactions. And these amount of transactions is considerably higher than the previous month in entirety, which is February. Some of that is seasonal, of course, some of that is very much so seasonal, but we are noticing an uptick into the rental market for condominiums. Well, the same area, downtown, which once again, I have defined the parameters as C1, C8. If you're familiar with the TREP maps, you can take a look at it to see what I'm truly talking about in terms of C1, C8. We have an average cost of rent of $2,566 for freehold rentals. So this includes all types of properties from townhomes to detached. Now, one thing to note with freehold rentals as we go on in this video to break down the numbers and the number of transactions, that's going to provide more context for you. If you're renting just a basement apartment, so meaning there's a detached property, 2-story, and the upstairs is rented separate from the downstairs, the basement apartment counts towards the overall rental figures, whether you're looking at price, days on market, whatever you're looking at. The basement transaction counts towards the freehold rental market numbers. So for this reason, you have a lot of situations where in certain areas, the average is actually lower than what you might think it might be because the basement numbers are driving the average down. Meaning for a basement on average, you can get something for anywhere from $900 for a basement to $1,450 to $1,650. Maximum you're looking at in certain areas, $1,800, $1,900 for a basement rental. Now let's look at Toronto Central. And when we look at Toronto Central, we're looking at Central Toronto. And once again, you can take a look at the map that I may link into the description box so you know what I'm honestly talking about. But it's basically Bathurst, Yonge, even certain areas in Dufferin, Bayview, really central arteries of Toronto. And for both, obviously, the freehold rental numbers and the condo rental numbers, when we look at Toronto Central, the downtown areas that I just aforementionedly talked about are excluded. It wouldn't make sense for me to bake those numbers into these numbers as well. We're just looking at Central Toronto with the exclusion and sole exclusion of downtown area because we just discussed that as its own separate area. So the average cost of rent for a condominium in Central Toronto is $2,121, and the average cost of rent for a freehold rental property in Central Toronto, $3,380. Now, believe it or not, there's actually a lot of freehold rental properties in Central Toronto that are more expensive in downtown Toronto. But nonetheless, the fact that it's higher by a factor of around $700 to $800 did surprise me. Next up, let's look at Toronto East, where we have the average cost of rent for a condominium of $1,967 per month, and an average cost of rent for a freehold property of the factor of $2,452 per month. Now, actually, you expect this figure to be lower, and it is lower on both fronts than downtown Toronto and Central Toronto. But give or take a couple of $100, and that's not something small, right? Obviously, when you're talking about rental figures, $50 to $100 it seems marginal, but it's still consequential. Nonetheless, more or less consistent when we look at downtown, so far Central and Eastern Toronto, as opposed to the freehold portion of the market where there's a large variance for Central Toronto versus downtown and Eastern Toronto. Next up, we have Toronto West, where the average cost of rent for a condominium in the western part of Toronto, according to the Toronto Real Estate Market and Rental Market in 2021, is $2,077, and the average cost of rent for a freehold property. Now, another important point here. So as is the case where people will rent out freehold properties, their basement separate, so is the case that they obviously rent out the upstairs separate. Dual income property, right? So you have two sources of income for one property because you have two different sets of tenants. At the end of the day though, when you do this for a rental property, obviously a freehold property that has separate entrance and exit for basement and upstairs, the sum total amount of money you may actually derive from the property won't be that much different than if you were to rent the whole thing out together. But when we're looking at averages here, it does make a bit of a difference because they go in as two transactions. So literally one rental property, one physical rental property can go into the numbers as two separate transactions because that's what actually happened. There's a transaction upstairs and downstairs because they were rented separately. Whereas if it was just that property being rented all by itself for the entire house, it would be counted as one entry, and the number might be the same at the end of the day, but it would be one entry versus the two entries. Anyways, lastly, York region, which is a very vast region. Once again, you know, it's much larger than all these other areas we're discussing. And in future videos, I'll make more specific videos about York region where we're looking at more specific areas. But for condominium, you have an average cost of rent of around, once again, consistent with what we see in Toronto. And for a freehold rental property, you have the average cost of rent of $2,800. And the reason, once again, the York region cost of rent for freehold properties are much larger is because believe it or not, even tenants, when they want to rent in today's world, they actually prefer to rent a little further out of the city. And once again, this is not just based on the numbers that we're looking at, but from my daily experience of working with landlords and working with tenants who are looking for freehold properties, in some cases, even condominiums as well. Anyways, that's the rental market rundown. Subscribe for more videos. You can find my contact info in the description box. Feel free to get in touch with me with any further questions you may have. Thank you for watching and stay tuned.